Hello everyone, welcome to the Scouting Space. This is our very first webinar, one of many, no doubt. What is the purpose of the Scouting Space? Well, it's to connect rookie and seasoned property investors and everyone in between with knowledge about what is going on in the New Zealand property space. And we've got a strong focus on the future and what that may look like as well. So my name is Ryan Weir. I am tonight's facilitator. A little bit about my background. I am the Director of Property Scouts New Zealand, and we have 20 successful property management franchises or property management experts throughout New Zealand. I'm a second generation property manager and also the current Deputy Chairman of the Residential Property Managers Association of New Zealand. You can probably gather from the very first slide that tonight's focus area of the Scouting Space is on Central Otago. Now, a little bit about me. I was actually born in Southland and brought up in Otago. So my father and his parents are from Queenstown. So I've been holidaying in Central Otago for as long as I can remember. So I think I have pretty deep ties and a lot of knowledge about the region. However, that went all out the window last night. And I say that because last night I had a quick catch up, a little rehearsal with our two panelists. And I was absolutely floored by what they told me is currently going on in the region and what is in the pipeline for the region in the future. So tonight you are in for a real treat with our two guest speakers because they've got so much knowledge about this region and put me to shame with what I thought I knew about the region. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our main speaker tonight, and that is Henry Van der Velden. So a little bit about Henry. He's an experienced business owner, and Henry's got extensive expertise gained through his involvement with a number of successful property investments and property developments and horticulture developments. Henry values honesty, integrity, transparency, and the delivery of quality developments. So that's Henry. Now, a little bit about our second speaker. So representing Property Scouts, we've got Ron Gloag. Ron was brought up in Central Otago, and he worked in the region for over 10 years as a civil engineer before diving into programming in Dunedin and Wellington. Ron then worked as a senior manager for AMI, IAG, and then the head of digital for Littleton Port Company. After working in the corporate life for a long time, Ron decided to resign and pursue his own business interests in property management with Property Scouts. So Ron is a keen property investor, and the investments he holds are mainly in the region, Arrowtown, Cromwell, Wanaka, and Christchurch. So that's a little bit about our speakers. I'll just quickly touch on the agenda for tonight. First and foremost, we're not trying to sell you anything. We're not getting any incentives or anything like that. We are purely here to educate you. It's completely free. We are a real community. And what we want to talk about tonight is the key areas of the Central Otago region. What we want to talk about as well is what is driving the growth in these areas and the region, and how the district councils are reacting and responding to the growth in the region. So without further ado, I would like to pass you over to Ron, who's going to take us through the slide deck, which starts with the focus areas. Ron, would you be able to take over?
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, we're going to cover off just at a high level tonight, Queenstown, Wanaka, Cromwell and Clyde. And I'm very pleased to welcome my old friend, I think almost 40 years old friend, my ex-neighbour when I lived in Cromwell, to come along and speak. Well, Henry's got a wealth of knowledge, and I'll talk about a wee bit about key points, changes in the district plans, but Henry will be able to elaborate a lot more deeply into each area. So welcome along, Henry. Next slide, Ryan. Right, this is just to give everybody an idea of what house prices in this region. The first one is housing affordability, which is basically the how much more a house costs than the average income. And as you can see, the Queenstown Lakes District housing has become quite unaffordable for the average person, which was driving a lot of the key underlying problems in this area. So you'll see that as a reoccurring theme. So getting labour is a real problem, and it's because people can't afford houses. And as you can see, the mean house price is about 1.7 here and about $1 million in the rest of the country. So it's quite a lot higher. Okay, so why is Queenstown property so expensive? I'm sure you guys can all read that, but I'll let Henry elaborate on why he thinks Queenstown was driving the Queenstown market.
Right, thanks, Ron. And thanks, Ron, for the introduction. With Central Lakes, particularly Queenstown, it's a location that people desire to live, albeit that it's beyond a lot of people's income streams or affordability. But having said that, Queenstown is one of the triangle, or the Golden Triangle, as I talk about the location. The Golden Triangle consists of Queenstown, Wanaka and Cromwell. Queenstown being the primary location, the most expensive, followed by Wanaka, and then the poor cousin being Cromwell. So given that Queenstown has a lot to offer, the experience that comes with Queenstown, the construction, the work that's available, the amount of growth that consists in that area, all bodes well for people to be in that location. They want part of it. They consider it being paradise. We're actually finding that there is quite a lot of Aucklanders coming down south, wanting to get part of Queenstown, even though that it's more expensive than Auckland now. But the location is the desired reason for them coming down.
There's a house just come on the market there for 35 million, the most expensive house.
Oh,
so,
right.
Yeah, I think the target's Singaporeans because of AML.
Right.
Yeah, relatively easy to invest here for them.
So it isn't cheap to be in Queenstown. For example, a 3-bedroom property in Queenstown can be anywhere up to $1,000 a week. Whereas you look at Cromwell, for example, and you're paying $600 a week for a 3-bedroom, so that equates to $200 a bedroom. So you can quite easily see that Cromwell's the poor cousin. So what we find too is that if Queenstown gets a little bit too expensive or too much growth there for people in their sort of late 50s, early 60s, they tend to move over the hill into Wanaka. And eventually, after time, obviously we can't stop growth. They transgress down the valley further back into Cromwell. So being in that triangle, given that you can actually invest in the property and the residential market, gives you a good structure and base to work from. And as the other markets we were looking at talking about is Canterbury. That particular market I see as undervalued. At the moment, their property values are on average less than Dunedin, which has not been seen historically in my time. So the reason for that is that the earthquakes, they suppressed the market. And whilst they got some traction with demand, it sort of increased the price. But at that point, when the demand come on, which was November 2020, they were still behind the average market throughout, or the median price in New Zealand. So for those that are looking at investing in the South Island, a good place would be Canterbury, for the reasons that I think there's some good upside there. Having said that, getting back to Central Lakes, there is some very proactive things happening. The council is going through Plan Change 19 on the back of a spatial plan that they've put together, and that's trying to put the district plan back into perspective and try and work out where the growth is going to be for the next 30 years in this planning process. So with councils being very proactive, very much in favour of growth for the area, we're very, very fortunate to be in that situation. So
Brilliant.
Back to you.
Just before I forget, I did a bit of a rookie mistake in opening up this. I forgot to mention to the attendees, this is a very interactive session. So if at any point you have any questions, please just pop it in the Q&A box. Unlike a lot of webinars and other bits and pieces where the questions get answered at the end, you can pop the questions in at any stage and we'll answer them then and there. So it's really good if you're impatient. I actually have one question already. I noticed, Ron and Henry, that many of the previous mayors of Queenstown happen to be developers. What influence, if any, do you think that has had on the region?
Those developers that you're talking about have been at the coalface, and they understand the processes through council. They are generally people that are philosophical and have patience. It does take time to get developments through the process, particularly if you're going through a plan change and you end up in the Environment Court. That's part of the RMA. So we're stuck with that. And you've got to have plenty of time on your side to make it happen. And you've got to look at the council's work there. They're there to protect the community. They're there to make sure that things are done in the right processes and given the right regime that's in front of them. So we're very lucky to be in that situation for Central Lakes. There's the Queenstown area that looks after Queenstown region and Wanaka, and then Central Otago looks after from sort of Queensbury right through to Alexandra and encompasses Ranfurly and the surrounding areas from there, and including Roxburgh as well. So they have a huge task in front of them, but they are very receptive and they know the growth and they're looking for growth and trying to make it all work and dovetail themselves in with the developers.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Next slide, Ron. Cool. So we've got a few slides just to cover off the major. There's a lot more developments going on in Queenstown, but this is the major ones in the district plan change. So first one's Ladies Mile as we're driving in. Go past Lake Hayes. It's just on the top of the hill as we come in, and and the next one is Park Ridge and Woolshed Road housing. It's housing designed to be more affordable. We've got a slide showing a bit more about that. 632 sections there, and then there's a development of a village at Jacks Point, which is both Park Ridge and Jacks Point is on the road down to Kingston as we go south. There's a wee bit of land there, but the whole Queenstown area is quite constrained. So next slide. Back one. Yeah, cool. So this is Ladies Mile, and what happened is quite famously in the news. I think the council's bought some land there with a house that's hit the news because it hasn't met quite the standards, so they've got to do a fair bit of rebuild there. But yeah, they're looking to put 2,400 high density and medium density homes there, build a town centre. Most of it's on the, as you're driving towards Queenstown, on the right hand side of the road, although there's a wee bit there on the left. And there's 2 schools and a sports hub there. So it's located between Lake Hayes and the Shotover River as you're driving in. So you got anything more to add on that one, Henry?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic, the amount of growth that's happened in a short period of time. And there are some constraints there. They're going through a growth spurt and some growing pains as well. But they are getting sub-regions, as Ron just mentioned. So it's not totally ring fenced. And there's certainly some more land that is available there that can be rezoned or could be rezoned, subject to either a resource consent or a plan change. So I think, like I said earlier, Queenstown's got a lot to offer. Everyone wants to be there and have part of that paradise.
Yeah, the key thing there is the upgrade of the road to allow for the infrastructure. It's getting very congested, especially as you go on the other side of the shot over around 5 Mile, around 5 o'clock. So there's a lot of infrastructure work needs to be done to support that, and the locals will have to live with that for a while.
Surely not as bad as the Ladies' Mile of Auckland, though, Ron.
Well, that's the good thing about Auckland. A trip to Auckland always sorts out what you think the traffic jam looks like.
Exactly. The next one is Park Ridge.
Yeah, Park Ridge. So what's happened is there's been a high quality development. Jack's Point. Most people are aware of that. Really nice golf course. You'd be quite accurate, or you lose your golf ball. And then what the council's doing is looking at developing, and they are in progress at the moment. Hanley's Farm. There's a huge amount of new houses going, and they're quite high density, 300-400 square metre type sections. And then the next development is Coneburn, which is closer to Queenstown, and then part of that development is going to, I think they've got to develop a roundabout as part of it, and then there's more high density. So basically, the council is being very proactive in trying to sort out the accommodation issues. There's like something like 20 rental properties available right across this whole region, and like 1,500 holiday homes. So it's a accommodation crisis, which turns into a labour crisis. So
Ron,
that's causing
with the imbalance of those two, short-term versus traditional tenancies, is that purely because people are chasing higher returns?
No, the people are chasing a higher return, but the people I've been talking to, what they want to do is, because it's such a spectacular region, they want to finish their homes and use it as a holiday home. Gotcha. And then what happens is they can achieve as much, if not more, even with say a 90-day consent as a holiday home as they can, with it being rented for the whole year. So it basically gives them access. Wow. So what the council is reacting to that to make it harder to get 90, 180-day and 360-day terms, putting pressure on that. So that there's been a recent rule changes around that. So that's going to get more and more difficult. So if you're thinking about that, you really need to make sure that you're talking to a very good planner to make sure you get that through. So the other thing that's happening is a lot of young people that are building attached flats or duplexes to make their homes affordable, because what's the cost to build there now, Henry? About 4,000 a square metre?
Yeah, at least 4,000.
4,000. It's about 3.5 in Cromwell. It's right. Yeah, and this is for your pretty standard home, not high spec.
But just to add to that, Ryan, if you look at the rental situation and how much is charged on a per weekly basis, for every region, it's normally around about 5 to 6% of the GV or the CV. So it's all relative as to where you are in each region. Yep. But that's historically where the return has been, sort of 5-6%.
Cool. So Jack's Point, which is the one we mentioned earlier, further out. So the initial stages of the development are there. So they're developing a whole village quite close to the airport, actually. And there's a lot of prefabricated townhouse style buildings being done there.
Yes, that's through the Swiss company here in Cromwell.
Yeah. So
they've got the factory here, and they develop it or make it here in Cromwell and send it through to Queenstown.
Yeah. So basically, what's happening there is because of the labour shortages and also lately materials, it's been it takes a long time to do a build. Well, now by building it in the factory, what's happening is that it shortens the build time and the cost of money, and gives you much more certainty. The tricky bit around the country, some developers are finding is that with a normal house, you can actually see it being built, so you get paid in stages. So if you, you know, some people are getting caught out because they can't actually see the stage it's up to. They have to pay for a stage while it's still in the factory. So it's, you know, you need to be quite careful when you're doing that in terms of making sure that the place that's doing it here in Cromwell is doing they're doing a fantastic job at Jack's Point, as far as I can see, and there's a lot more development going on there right now and building that village, really high quality stuff.
So ironically, given that it's based here in Cromwell, 90% of its workload is in Queenstown at the moment.
Cool.
Wanaka.
So Wanaka, you'll probably notice the same list again. There is a couple of key differences. Queenstown's sort of got an international market, but Wanaka is very popular with Kiwis. It's an outdoor place, safe place, it's again stunning scenery, and very outdoor recreational focused. From a developer point of view, we've got a much stronger environmental groups here, so it's quite hard to push stuff through because they're very, very active there in making sure the environment keeps its integrity, which is a good thing. But sometimes, you know, you need to be practical. Like, you know, an example was they were looking at putting a gondola up the ski field, which sort of, you know, great for tourists, you know, from the base, and would have, you know, taken away the scarring from the roading, etc. But they couldn't get that past the environmentalists. So consequently, the roads bulldozed every year, and the environmental impact, in my view, is worse. So it's interesting. But you got anything else to add on Wanaka?
Yeah, I think the construction industry as a whole in Wanaka is the fuel for the GDP in Wanaka, and it's always been like that. There's huge growth happening there, not just residential, but if you look at 3 parks, industrial, commercial, it's been done by Alan Dippy, who's the developer there. That's sort of set Wanaka alight, and on the back of that, it's bringing people in and giving it good growth. So there's a big future for Wanaka. There's lots of opportunities to develop it further. So I see that as a real growth area in the future. Having said that, we are sort of tracking on a trajectory where the market is softening in the property market. We're sort of basically in a balanced market, so it's neither a vendor's market nor a buyer's market, and I see that sort of staying like that until early next year, and then once we get sort of beyond the 6-month period from what the Reserve Bank has done to interest rates, we'll see some sort of more negativity coming into the market. But again, for those that are in the market for the long term, it really doesn't matter. It's a cyclical thing. It's really a 10-year cycle, 7 and 3. Having said that, if you look at the previous cycles, it was a 10-year cycle right through till 2007. And from 2000 to 2007, they were good years. And then it should have gone from 2007 to 2010, but it tracked through to 2012. So that gave us a 5-year period where we had little growth. Then it should have actually gone for another 7, 2019. But again, we got another 2 years out of it. So the market peaked in November 21. So if you look at if there's been a reset for that 10-year cycle, it may well be that the end of 24 is when we will start seeing the market tracking upwards again for another 7 years. That's my projection based on what I've been through in the last 3 to 4 cycles.
When you said, Henry, you distinguished between, you broke down the 10-year cycle between 7 and 3. What was the 3? Was that a balanced market? Or
So it came off the peak after 7 years and then went through a balanced market and then into the buyer's favour for that 3-year term.
Right.
But being in the buyer's favour, the market was retracting as well in terms of the capital value. And then once it actually hit the bottom, it came back up again. So, effectively, the peak or the high of any market will supersede the peak of the previous market.
Yep.
So from an investment point of view, property is a good investment to have. It's solid, you can touch it. Bricks and mortar, you can see it. And you've got total control yourself over it.
Mm. Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? It's going to be interesting to see what the capital gains tax does, because I know there's quite a lot of people holding property that would normally move back into the market just because they're waiting not to go out of the period for having to pay capital gains.
Mm-hmm.
So that's caused not helping the housing shortage. It's had the opposite effect, just in the same way as removing interest deductibility. There's huge pressure. Ryan will talk about this, but there's huge pressure on property managers to increase rents to cover landlord costs at the moment. It's up and down the country. Expectations with inflation going wild, and we're trying to be prudent, but you can get in between the owner and and their expectations. Yeah, and it's some pressure of policy that's coming through, in my view.
Yeah, often with the property manager is the meat and the sandwich. But what the government's got to realise is that private landlords, at the end of the day, are a business. So if you put more cost on them in terms of compliance, higher interest rates, they will look to pass those costs on to their customers, which are, of course, tenants. So yeah, like Ron touched on, across the country, we are seeing landlords trying to pass on some acute, shall I say, rent increases to tenants. So sometimes those expectations are unrealistic, and that's the role of a good property manager, is to bring those expectations down to a realistic level so that sort of both parties can win and it's fair to both parties. Sorry, Henry, did I cut you off there?
No, that's okay. But for those that want to hold on to their property and they're there for the long term, what's effectively happened is that the government brought on the bright line test. And initially when it brought it in, it was for a 2-year period. Then it superseded that through to a 5-year period, and then now a 10-year period. So what that's done to those that are quite happy to hold on to their property is sit tight. And once their term is expired, then they'll go and put it on the market, so they don't have to pay that capital gains tax. So inevitably, that's done is it's caused those property owners to hold on to them, therefore causing a lack of property on the market while the demand was up, which pushed the prices up more so. I think from my personal point of view, the government should really allow the market to run its own course and have none of these obstacles in front of us. At the end of the day, the people are the market, and they will determine what price they're prepared to pay for any property in any region.
As a property investor, typically you'll turn your stock over in order to take the funds out of it to build more housing, and that relieves pressure. If you can't turn your stock over to release funds, then by caught in bright line, then that causes a shortage because it's just not being built. It's a short story. So shall we carry on with the next slide?
Yeah.
We've got any questions coming through there? No.
Not at this
Not
stage.
yet.
So Wanaka, the developments in Wanaka, Longview. Take it away, Ron.
Okay, Longview. So Longview is this area's answer to low-cost housing. So it's a high-density housing based in Lake Hawea. It's not Lakeview. It's on the other side of the hill from the lake, more towards the Hawea River. So if you turn right just as you go up the dam, you'll see it there. very, very high density, and yeah, it's targeted. They're particularly targeting first home buyers. So yeah, so that'll be interesting with the interest rates going up. The next area we'll cover off is Terrace Airport, which is very interesting. It's basically reaction to Queenstown's airport not being capable of scheduling large jets because of the high noise. If you're ever down in shot over country and you hear the existing jets coming in, the houses just about rumble. It's extremely noisy. A lot of people think it's congestion, but it's actually noise. And then the idea there is the Terrace Airport will feed Central, so it'll feed Wanaka, Cromwell, and Queenstown. And then 3 parks. Henry touched on this earlier. Alan Dippy's developing that. He's got to focus on the commercial at the moment, but he'll be moving on to 140 hectares for 1,000 residential households, and then he's also planning a retirement village. So do you want to flip to the next slide, Ryan? So this is Longview. Give you some idea of the density. Wow. And this is directly across the road from where Hawea is now. It's a sort of new area breaking into farmland. So
this is the intensification that I'd usually only see in Auckland.
Yeah, it's amazing down here. Like it's an interesting thing here is like when we see a 300 square metre section down here, we'd go, oh my God, no one will buy that as a local. And then someone from Auckland will come down and think 300 square metres is sort of normal. Yeah. And so it's very hard to keep a clear lens when you're living amongst it and being used to the larger section size. So yeah, so the advantage with Wanaka is that, and Hawea, etc., there is flat land to build on, not like Queenstown, but where Wanaka's prized land is near the lake or lake view, and there's not much lake view left thanks to Bob and Henry's developments. Yeah, and this is to give you an idea where Terrace is. You'll see on the left-hand side there where Cromwell, Wanaka, and Queenstown there. This is very interesting. What happened here is Auckland Airport bought in 50% share in Queenstown Airport, and they're effectively the competition for Christchurch. So the city of Christchurch bought a whole lot of land in the area called Murray Point. Now, what happened is Jim Bolt was pushing pretty strongly, at least I think it was 100 hectares. It was quite a bit of land in a 100-year lease and near a Wanaka airstrip to develop it. But basically what's happened is that this airport here has scuttled it because it doesn't have the same environmental effects. And then I think they've got they're just doing their runway alignments at the moment. So it won't be quite as profitable for Christchurch to do it as because the larger planes are landing there and they're coming down through Tekapo. So they've got to subtract. They've got to subtract the flights they would have got because they would have been landing here. They'll be landing here. So, but saying that, they bought the land for relatively cheap. So, and it's a good position to do a low cost development. Do you want to? Henry knows a bit of background about this.
Yeah. So the deal that was struck was basically done at about $50,000 a hectare, which was the going rate at the time. So the agent that was facilitating the deal from where I sit obviously did a very good job in the structure and the confidentiality of the buyers. But it has taken some negativity into the area. Obviously, people have to get used to growth. This is a major project for the area. And I guess it'll take time for the locals and other parties to get their head around the whole thing. And it does need to go through the proper process, the RMA. which is it all takes time. So I don't think we can envisage to see it there anytime soon. And there'll be a lot of hurdles on the way through that need to be ironed out and worked through with all interested parties.
So Henry, if you're a betting man, when can I first touch down at the Terrace Airport? What year are we talking?
Well, I think you're going to have a lot of opposition to that coming from Queenstown, and the logistics of it. Like, you've got to remember that if the tourists come into Terrace, you've got all these logistics. You've got to bus them to Queenstown because that's probably where they'll stay. That's the adventure capital of New Zealand. That's where they want to be. So you've got to take that into consideration. I personally don't think I'll see the development of that airport in my lifetime, but I've been known to be wrong before. But it does take a long time to get planning permission for something that of this size project.
Okay, so very slow burn.
So there's 3 parks. I'll let Henry, he's got quite a bit of background in this. I'll let Henry talk about 3 parks.
So 3 parks, that is Alan Dippy's development. He's put in a roundabout, an underpass to facilitate safe lanes and traffic to get to 3 parks. 3 parks comprises of mostly industrial with retail, which one would have thought that Wanaka would have had enough of that already as it was, but it's interesting to see the development that has occurred in the last 2 years after the streets and the roading was put in place. So it's a winner, and on the back of that, I think it'll create huge growth for people coming into town, getting work in this industrial area. The Mega Mitre 10 was one of the first large retail spaces to be built. Then you've got New World there, which is also another big complex. They're in the process, Calder Stewart's are in the process of building a big warehouse. So they're getting all the tenants, what I would call large anchor tenants, into that area, which will bring other smaller tenants that can coattail the activity from those bigger tenants. So I take my hat off to for the people that had the vision and the patience to put this through council.
Just to get my bearings, Henry or Ron, on where 3 parks lies, Puzzling World in Wanaka, whether or not it still exists, is this that part of that land?
Yes, it does. It backs onto that land as we speak. So if you were to go from the Puzzle Centre or Puzzle World through to Wanaka, about 1.5 kilometres from the Puzzle World, the developer put in a roundabout, and that roundabout has segregated the traffic into 3 parks or continuing through to Wanaka.
Gotcha. So the Wanaka township will become like Queenstown's township. It'll become boutique. You know, it's already got quite high standards in regard to the look and the appeal for the street, but the actual main business centre will be situated well behind Wanaka in this 3 parks area. So, you know, Noel Lemming's there, the Mountain Warehouse is coming, the warehouse itself's there. So you've got big anchor tenants, and then what will happen is that Wanaka's got room for growth. The airport's going to be relatively Terrace Airport will be relatively close, and you know, it's obviously got a strong following with the baby boomers who want to retire into an area. So next slide.
Cromwell.
Cromwell.
Talk to us
Henry
about
doesn't know
Cromwell.
Cromwell. Yeah, of course he does.
Indeed.
So very, very so yeah, I'll let Henry take it. Like he's probably the resident expert of New Zealand on Cromwell. So
So just to give you an update on where or how long I've been in Cromwell for, I arrived in '84. I had a previous life with Ron in the engineering side of the works, and then moved into property. So I've been in property for over 30 years now. Own my own business in Cromwell and Alexandra. So I've seen the growth spurts that Cromwell has had, and certainly it took some time for Cromwell to move into a growth pattern after the dam was filled up. There was a settling period, and then it took quite a bit to get that snowball to move. And now that we've got it moving, we've got a bit of traction, and there's a lot of growth happening in this area. Now, you know, we're in the situation now. We've got the willing tree going. That's been a very successful development. We've also had Alpha Street developments where there used to be a motor camp, and the owners of that motor camp were able to secure that land in a resource consent to subdivide it into residential houses or residential sections. And this has been a huge success as well. And it's been a huge success because people are wanting to come and drift to Cromwell and be part of Cromwell. And again, we've got a large industrial base, and we're the hub, the industrial hub of Central Lakes, where we're equidistant to Invercargill, equidistant to Dunedin, and then it's a 6-hour journey by truck to Christchurch. So a lot of the transport goods and materials do come through Cromwell, and on the back of that, we've got Plan Change 19 being facilitated at the moment, where this is where the council are being proactive to find out what the public want in terms of high density, low density, any zone changes that can be put together in a fashion that is conducive to the community. We are still not ring fenced at the moment, but anything east of the state highway is the preferred area that the council want developed. So once all that gets developed, then there'll need to be some sort of plan as to where do we go from here. The industrial base, we're sitting at $650 a square metre now. 30 years ago, I was selling that for $7 a square metre. So you can see the big difference. But having said that, at $650 a square metre for industrial, we're cheap compared to Queenstown, where that's hit $1,200 a square metre, particularly along the Ladies Mile. So council have recognised this, and they're opening up some more land through a plan change so that we can provide more industrial sites for the demand that we're actually seeing from out of the area. And the demand we're seeing is, again, some good tenants, national tenants coming into Cromwell that want to be part of the growth and be part of the lifestyle that we've got here as well. So just remember that Cromwell, you know, it does coattail Wanaka and Queenstown, but Queenstown's only 45 minutes away from Cromwell, Wanaka's 40 minutes, and Alexandra's 25 minutes. So what a location, what a position to be in.
Henry, I've had a question come through as a direct message, and it said, based on today's current prices in Cromwell, do you think they will double within the next 10 years?
Historically, they have doubled every 10 years. And I continue to see that happening. It's not going to change, Ryan. I think if you look on a global sense, rather than actually have blinkers on within New Zealand, if you go to Hong Kong, we're 7 times, or Hong Kong's 7 times more expensive than we are in Auckland. So even Sydney is 3 times Auckland. I mean, we're cheap compared to those other cities. And I think you'll find too that we've gone through the pandemic. We've got situations now where people have seen that we're a safe haven. The government has done well to suppress the pandemic. And I think you'll find that a lot of people from Europe, the US, Canada, South Africa, will all try and come and have a piece of New Zealand.
Thank you.
Cool. So this is just talking a bit more about how the council's planning on reacting to the sort of to the growth that's happening here. So what they're looking at, I've got a slide here, will show you where what Henry is talking about, the district plan change is looking at increasing the density. And then the other core thing that's happened in Cromwell is that because of, and Henry mentioned it, the holiday park used to, a lot of people stayed there, and now that's residential. A lot of the motel development was in Cromwell along the old main road. Now that's pushed out and zoned to be around the town centre. The logistical problem that Cromwell's always had is that the Ministry of Works built the town centre by the main highway and not by the lake. So it hasn't had that much appeal. And then what they've been trying to do through district plan changes is force motels and operations out towards the town centre, which is actually on the outskirts, not actually where this beautiful lake is. So consequently, there's quite a shortage of quality accommodation here. And then what they're looking at doing is increasing the density. Barry Ave is like the main road that runs through Cromwell. Sort of it's northwest, and it starts from the town centre and then runs back into the old part. And they're looking at rezoning that. So we've got a slide on each of those, so we can talk to those as we go through. So do you want to flip over, Ryan? So so do you want to talk about each one of these?
Yeah, I can. So the Wooing Tree, it was zoned originally as RRA6. So as of right, you could develop sections to 4,000 square metres. So, but instead the previous owners decided to plant a vineyard on there. And so that was 20 years ago. Given the growth, they decided to go for a plan change, and that was approved by council. And hence now we've got sections down to about the 250 mark, 250 square metres. So stage 1 and 2 have been sold out completely, and the sales are proceeding on the future stages. There is also a boutique retail area that has been designated for the Wooing Tree, and that will encompass some land running parallel to State Highway 8B and interconnect with the underpass that goes from the Wooing Tree and connects through into the town centre. So that's the Wooing Tree in short. Shannon Farm was a rural block, and it still is partly rural. Future development for that was through a plan change, which was approved by the Environment Court after appeal process, of which 160 hectares have now been designated for rural residential lifestyles. So the minimum size there is 1,500 square metres. It'll go up through to 2,000, 3,000 square metres, 4,000 square metres, 6,000 square metres, 8,000 square metres, then through to a hectare and 3 hectare blocks. Now, the close proximity of this particular development is in Ritten Vale, which is on the outskirts of the Cromwell town boundary, and very, very handy to all the amenities, but yet have that rural lifestyle living. The next one, Barry Ave, again, along Barry Avenue or anything east of Barry Avenue primarily is going to be high density. Basically, the planners have seen how the quarter-acre sections have been subdivided. There's hardly any quarter-acre sections left within that town centre boundary, hence the reason that council recognised that to increase the population base without having to do any more development was to intensify. The infrastructure that was put in place by the Ministry of Works on the western side of Barry Avenue was put in place for a population of 10,000 people. So at the moment we're sitting at about 6,500, and but that doesn't include the rural outlying areas within the farming community. The Cromwell Centre, this has been recognised by council that it needs an upgrade. It needs to function differently to what it is. It needs some sort of attention to the upgrade that will rejuvenate the mall to bring the population base back in there and to spend some money. So at this point in time, there is office space primarily on the southern side of the town mall, and anything sort of from the stream that runs through it north of that is primarily retail. The proposal for the mall is to look at taking down the verandas so that they can create some openness and light back into the central part of the mall, and by replacing the verandas with some type of glazing that will also allow protection from weather, etc., but also continue to let the light in. Part of the proposal is to talk to 3 or 4 tenants to see if they will allow council to buy their buildings, which again will open up the northern arterial access way into the mall. There is other proposals happening with, car parks are very tight for the mall at the moment, and there's various reasons for that, which council have recognised, but also they have recognised that more parking is required to facilitate any growth that they will create with the mall upgrade. And that's probably about the best I can tell you. The industrial area, we've touched on that. That has got a huge base. It has created huge employment, and hence we have a tradie base here. Having said that, we do have people travelling from Alexandra and Wanaka to come to Cromwell, but I think in time, given the time it takes to travel, those people will probably come down to Cromwell, given that it's a cheaper option to purchase a property. Properties now in Cromwell for an ex-Ministry of Works house, which was built circa 1980s, and they started selling for $48,000 in 1989, are now sitting at $650 through to $750. So that's the increase that we've had. But primarily properties now, it's not uncommon to sell a property over $1 million, and a property at 2.5 to 3 million is starting to become common also. So, and you might ask, where are these buyers coming from? We're finding a lot of people that have made some good capital gains out of Queenstown and Wanaka, have decided to come into to Cromwell, spend their money, and have some money still left in their back pocket for travel or other things they want to do. Conversely, that's the same for Auckland people that are migrating down south. They have a higher median price that they're selling at, so they can capitalise on a lower market in the South Island, be it Queenstown, Wanaka or Cromwell.
Nice one. Speaking of migrating, we're going to talk about Clyde next.
Clyde, yeah, this is an interesting place, Clyde. It's quite historic, as you can see from the picture there. It's quite a beautiful place, and what has happened is that they locally they built us in part of building the cycle trails. They built this Dunstan cycle trail, and spent a lot of money on it. I think it's around 20 million or something to develop it. It goes along rock face, very spectacular, and it's up and down hill, but quite an easy ride. So what's happened there is that a lot of cyclists during the pandemic, I think there's something like 70,000 cyclists went through there. What's happened is that the advent of electric bikes and the cycle trail have sort of meant this hugely popular, which is driving accommodation needs at both ends. So it's sort of like the average age of cyclists has increased, and it's beautiful, beautiful ride. You get off at Clyde, and Clyde it's got the beauty, but hasn't got the accommodation there to support that. It also links the bottom of Lake Dunstan, so it's popular with boaties. Beautiful historic township. It's got really strong population growth, as we'll show in one of these slides, that how the council's reacting to that and the district plan change to allow for that population growth. And the other interesting thing about the cycleway, they've already linked Alexandra, which is just down below Clyde, to Roxburgh. Beautiful. There's a section still by jet boat, which is really, really nice. I've done that ride myself. But the next key one is going to go down to Quarra Gorge and link Queenstown to Cromwell, which will mean that it comes out in a wee township just to the west of Cromwell called Bannockburn. Beautiful old gold mining place, and it's going to become very, very popular there. So at the moment, it's very popular with people with rabbits and with people growing grapes. They're in a bit of competition, actually. Yeah, so it's elaborating on the Dunstan Trail that I was talking about before. 70,000 people. That's during COVID, so you can imagine what it's going to be like during the holiday season. So a lot of biking businesses are establishing around there, and these people have got to stay somewhere. So it's like the rail trail was, except for some steroids. It's much, much more scenic, an incredible ride. And then new residential areas. Henry can talk a bit more about this, but basically the rural areas between Clyde and Alexandra are being rezoned to be, or proposed to be rezoned for higher density. So there's opportunities there. And then there's a huge extension to retirement living just outside of Clyde. You'll find this all over the country, but particularly in this area, there's a lot of retirement growth because of the baby boomers retiring at the moment. And then they're upgrading. They're putting a new wastewater network into this area to be able to cope with this proposed growth. So you want to flick to the next slide there? So do you want to talk about this area marked in yellow, Henry?
Yeah, so the Clyde Township, it's very historical, and it does get a lot of tourists coming through. It's very close to Alexandra. Clyde Township is below the Clyde Dam, so there is an irrigation system that has been taken from the Clyde Dam to irrigate what they call Ernstcleugh flats, by where there's a lot of orchards and vineyards. So on the back of that, that's created a lot of interest in the area through the farming, through what Clyde Township itself has to offer. It's got Oliver's, which is very popular, and it's sort of really got it's made a statement for Clyde. With the rural areas, there is a lot of new development happening. There's more grapes getting put in and there's more cherries getting put in. So on the back of that, it's causing a lot of growth. It's also causing people to get a lot of pickers in the area, which creates a lot of growth during the seasons, particularly around Christmas, New Year. For the cherries, and then after that they're away doing grapes. So you know, a lot of good opportunities for Clyde and the outlying areas.
Really interesting, the whole area. Like in the 50s, Alexandra, 60s was very popular. Like most of Gore and Otago shifted up into the camping grounds, etc. And then what happened is in Coronet, the lowest ski field, his most accessible ski field was developed, but it was only rope tows. And then they started putting chairlifts in there. And then all of a sudden, the winter season in Queenstown and its sheer beauty, it took over. Not like locals didn't really want to stay there because it was so cold. But of course, being cold, the mountains being so close and being so high is a huge advantage to people doing winter recreation. So it's sort of completely taken over from Alexandra with its 11 inches a year rain, almost a desert. It's a really, really warm spot as a sort of as a recreation centre for young people doing it, and then consequently jet boating, adventure tourism is really taking off. Bungee jumping, we all know about it in that area. So and now on top of that in Queenstown, there's a whole new layer that comes in with the cycling, which is a older generation thing, plus the vineyards and storing the wine in the caves, and so there's a whole nother type of tourist there as well. So like last year we came out of COVID and they were getting up to 95% occupancy in hotels. Some of the hotels were having to shut down large parts of their hotel because they can't get staff. Man, why can't they get staff? Is people want to come here and work and do this, but they can't afford to stay. So there's a huge labour shortage. I mean, when we talk about not afford to stay, it's teachers, policemen, and not just hotel workers. It's extremely expensive place to stay. So the council's doing its best to try and sort that problem out. Not, it can't be a place of where rich people retire or visit without the people to support them. And they know they've got to try and solve that, but they've got this chronic land shortage in Queenstown. So that hence the density of the Hanleys, and hence I think Cromwell's got a lot more potential. Henry talked about the car park outside the mall. Why can't you get a car park outside the mall? It's heaps parking. It's because everybody stops here, carpools, and comes to Queenstown and Wanaka to work, because that's where they can afford. So those car parks are full of people that aren't actually at the mall. It's quite interesting.
Indeed.
Nice one. Well, what we might do is bring this to a close. And you guys have been, actually, I was going to say amazing, but you guys have been difficult guests, because I usually during the webinar take notes down of sort of gems and things like that. But I realized after the first 10 minutes, I couldn't write it all down. You just gave too much good information. So thank you very much for that. It's obviously, Central Otago is obviously a fascinating area of New Zealand. And I'm looking at my notes now, and I circled 3 particular words on my notes, and they were changes, challenges, and opportunities. And I think that sums up the Central Otago area pretty darn well. In testament to you two guys as guests on the Scouting Space, 60 minutes ago or 65 minutes ago, we let the attendees in, and not a single one has left. So they've been hanging off every word that you guys have got to say. And I think that's because you guys are literally boots on the ground. You're in the area, you're beaming in from Cromwell, and you guys have a deep understanding of the area. So thank you so much for being part of the very first the scouting space. We really appreciate it.
So just the audience, what we're going to do is we're going to bring in developers up and down the country with real local knowledge. Ryan's got someone in Auckland lined up. Quite a lot of people will develop in Auckland, also develop in Queenstown. It's quite interesting. And then what we'll do is we've got 2 or 3 really interesting developers to talk to down here who are doing particular developments. So that'll be great. And then if anybody else has got wants to hear about a particular reason, just reach out. We'll reach out to the developers in that region, or people with a local knowledge. May not even be a developer, it might be a planner, etc. And we'll drill in for you and find out where the opportunities are. And it's all good. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you. We'll see you next time, everyone.
See you guys.
Bye.
Bye, mate.